Hey everyone, it's Kino here. Thanks for joining me on this Yoga Sutra study course. Today we're going over Yoga Sutra Book 1, number 35. A fast sort of way of understanding this is that Patanjali says that subtle sense perception can create strength and steadiness of mind. In other words, focusing on the subtleties of the senses, the subtlety of what's available through the faculty of perception, will allow your mind to begin to reach a more steady, calm, and equanimous point of focus. Let's bring the hands together and enter the devotional space of spiritual study. Keep the eyes closed for a moment and bring the mind first into the body. At first, you may simply be aware of the body, and then, having a little bit of a hint at the deeper reflection of the sutra, bring your mind into the heart center. And as the mind drops into the spiritual heart, behind the sternum, tune into the subtle body, the subtle awareness of the sensation of your own body. And then gently allow your eyes to open. You may have noticed yourself that at first, if you're just generally aware of the body, the mind has a certain level of awareness. But if your mind can then drop into a more specific point of focus, and that point of focus is more subtle, the mind must become even more calm and steady. I'll say this sutra all together once in the Sanskrit, and then we'll break this down word by word. Visayavatī va pravrttir utpannā manasah sthiti-nibandhanì. Good. Let's start off with that first word. Repeat after me. Visayavatī, Visayavatī, Visayavatī. Visayavatī, containing a sense object. So this means that the focal point will revert to some sort of an object within the fields of your senses. Now, traditionally this could be anything, but it's ideal if it happens within the context of your own body. So your body is a sense object. It is within your sensory awareness. However, you could also be focusing on a flame or have another object of meditation. It is simply the sense object which now begins to be your object of attention. Visayavatī va pravrttir. Okay, repeat that after me. Pravrttir, pravrttir, pravrttir. So here we're talking about the vrittis. The vrittis, if you remember from the beginning of this course in Yoga Sutra Book 1, number 2, the vrittis are the revolutions of thoughts, the waves on the ocean of consciousness. So how do we create a space where the vrittis seem to still or seem to create a little bit of a break in their never-ending waves? So we're looking at the subtlety of sense perception to help still the vrittis. Visayavatī va pravrttir. Now repeat after me. Utpannā, utpannā, utpannā. Utpannā arises, or this brings about. So by focusing the mind on the subtlety of sense perception, this brings about a particular state of the mind. Let's move on to the next word. Manasah, manasah, manasah. Here Patanjali is making reference to the manas, which also from the second sutra, book 1, number 2, you know that the field of the citta, the field of the mind, is comprised of those three qualities, the ahamkara, the ego or the sense of I, and manas, the mechanical or information processing part of the mind where our thoughts and our memories are stored, and the buddhi, the higher intelligence. So here we're talking about the manas, or the mind. How can we create a sensation within the field of the body where the mind and the fluctuations of thoughts stop? Okay, so we're looking at subtle sense perception. Subtle sense perception creates strength and steadiness of mind. Nibandhanī, using the root from bandha, to bind the mind or keep the mind focused on a single point of attention. Now we're looking at this sutra all together. Subtle sense perception creates strength and steadiness of mind. If you focus only on the gross feelings of the material objects of the senses, whether you're just feeling generally your body, then the mind will be sort of general. It won't really have a very strong strong internal bandha. So we're looking at creating chitta bandha, to be able to bind the mind and keep it steady on that single point of attention. Subtlety of sense perception heightens the power of perception itself. So if we think about this, if you generally have a sense of where your body is, the mind itself has a quality of generality. But if you need to focus on a very specific point, try this with me now. Focus on the space directly between your sitting bones. Between your sitting bones. Take your mind and focus between the sitting bones. This is a hard place to feel. You could wiggle around for a moment and then think, space between the sitting bones. So your mind has to get more subtle, the subtlety of the sense perception. Then, in the space between the sitting bones, what exists? Are you aware of tactile sensation, or are you aware of the subtle body of energy, the body of feeling, underneath the skin and between the cells of the body where things are delicate, where things are perhaps more refined and subtle? So Patanjali essentially gives you a direction that will help create the idea of stability, the idea of heightening your power of perception by first dropping your attention into the field of the body and then allowing that to get more and more refined, so that the more subtle your point of focus, the stronger the mind becomes, as though you have to turn your attention so deeply inward that nothing else matters. Subtle sense perception is an invitation to the inner body, as though Patanjali is inviting you to experience the world of the senses when the objects of the senses are invited to their deepest possible level, only in the state of direct perception of that subtle experience of the inner body will the mind still. I invite you to try this during your asana practice. Instead of focusing on shapes, instead of focusing on, well, I've got to make this pose, I've got to tone up my abs, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, I've got to get a workout and hit it hard. Think about feeling the inner body. Open yourself up to a higher level of body intelligence by letting your mind steady. And as the mind steadies, the waters of the mind still, and you're allowed and are able to really perceive the deepest truth. That deepest truth of the subtle body, of the inner body, is one of the greatest gifts of your yoga practice. Because in that state of inner harmony, it doesn't matter what poses you're doing, because the state itself is the goal of the practice. Invite yourself to subtle sense perception. Keep bringing the mind deeper. Cultivate body intelligence. Drop your attention into the inner body, and then let the world of your practice transform. Let's say the sutra all together. Visayavatī va pravrttir utpannā manasah sthiti-nibandhanì. Visayavatī va pravrttir utpannā manasah sthiti-nibandhanì. And once more, Visayavatī va pravrttir utpannā manasah sthiti-nibandhanì. Let subtle sense perception take your mind into a state of steadiness and allow this to create the calm and equanimous inner focus that is the true testament to a lifetime of spiritual practice. Bring your hands together. Thank you so much for letting me be your guide into the inner tradition of yoga. Namaste.